Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to Movie Night here on Random Trek. Captain's log, stardate, well, somewhere between 1776 and things are about to get very dramatic. Oh, you see, we're listening here on Random Trek to the podcast where we boldly go into places you didn't expect. And today we're setting a course for The Patriot, a film that drops us in the American Revolutionary War with all the subtlety of a warp core breach. Now, before we get started, let's be clear. This is not a quiet diplomatic mission. This is less Federation peace talks and more negotiations have failed. Please stand by for dramatic music. At the center of it is all played by a man named Mel Gibson, a character who, like many great Starfleet captains, would really prefer not to get involved, but circumstances have other plans. And speaking of circumstances, we get Jason Isaacs in the mix, who Star Trek fans will recognize from Star Trek Discovery. And let's just say his approach to leadership here is very different. If Captain Lorca taught us anything, it's that not all commanders play by the same rulebook, and that definitely applies in this film. And you'll also spot Heath Ledger bringing a kind of energy that feels like a newly commissioned Starfleet officer, ready, determined, maybe just a little too eager to jump into an unknown. For longtime Trek fans, there's Rene Auberjonois from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, because nothing says historical drama like suddenly recognizing someone from a space station orbiting Bajor. So here's our mission for today. We're not here to spoil the journey. We're here to explore how this film feels. The tone, the performance, direction, writing, and yes, the spectacle. Does it transport you? Does it hold up? And does it earn its place among other cinematic epics? Or does it veer a little off course? Set your tricorders to curious. Keep your phasers on, let's say, thoughtful. And let's get ready to engage. I am Captain Christopher Ingle. Normally, I am joined by my first officer, Commander Brennan, the Mystical Mar, but he is away on an away mission today. And so I am joined by a regular guest. We haven't had him on here. What rank did we give you before? Were you Lieutenant Commander? It's Lieutenant Commander Chris Skywalker Dohmen. Dohmen, how we doing?
I'm doing very well, sir. Thank you very much for having me back and for talking about such an interesting film. This will be a fun discussion that we have in store today. And doing well. And yourself?
Yeah, really good. I've been looking forward to actually talking about this film here in the Year of the Captain. And we're going to talk about our good friend Jason Isaacs, because if there's a man who can play evil, twisted, and deadly, it's Jason Isaacs. And I love him so much. But let's get right into this. Let's start first off, as we normally do, with the plot of this film, which, if you know your revolutionary history, despite the fictionalization that this creates, for the most part, you understand what's going on. America wants to sign for independence. We are viewed as rebels from the British. They are beating us down into submission, and we've got to get a ragtag team together to somehow beat up what has been known as the greatest army the world had known up to that point. Army and Navy up to that point. And we are led by a man who is a war, and I put in air quotes, hero, Mel Gibson. So let's start here in terms of our plot, and we're just going to go into a little discussion with our questions. So first one I'm going to ask you, Dohmen. The character Benjamin Martin, he really comes off in this plot-wise as a reluctant hero pretty consistently, especially when we see in the first part of the film. Is it a classic trope? Does it still work?
It's a classic trope that can work, but there has to be the right kind of motivation for, what's going to cause this reluctant hero to become a little less reluctant to get into the fray. And while there's a lot that I could criticize in this movie in regards to how it portrays certain things, one thing that I do appreciate is how Benjamin Martin becomes entangled in the war effort. We get the backstory of him via his former second in command, played by Chris Cooper, that, he was certainly he was a guy who got things done, but in the bloodiest way possible during the 7 Years' War, where that kind of led to the events of the American Revolution. And it's all just, kind of told to us, foreshadowing for when he will eventually have a moment where we see on screen why he was as feared as he, as was claimed. And it's kind of funny that Benjamin Martin's character was very much based on a real life sort of ghost figure, as we might get into, that being Marion Fox, or the Swamp Fox.
The Swamp Fox.
Yeah, Francis Marion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which actually leads me, I guess, to this next point, though. This, I will say this and make this claim now. This is the best Revolutionary War film I've ever seen. Ever. Like, we have tons of World War II films, lots of Civil War films. Really, there aren't a lot of memorable and good, and I say good, we'll make that determination in the end, but any kind of decent quality for the Revolutionary War. We never have. I don't know why. I don't know what it is. But the question then becomes, with Benjamin Martin's turn here as this reluctant hero, is this a war story or is it a revenge story?
I would say it's a bit of a column A, column B. It's, it's a war story because of because of literally, like, for everyone else not named Benjamin Martin, this is just a war story, because this is how these characters are navigating and surviving in this very tense environment. For Benjamin himself, it is a bit of both. His life has completely changed, and in such a drastic way that he feels the need to take revenge. So, but it is, like I said, it's a little bit of both on his end. But for everyone else not named him, I would say it is very much a war story.
Yeah, I would agree, with the exception that with Heath Ledger too, we see where the revenge comes in, and we see with Martin where the revenge comes in, and it happens. It definitely happens. You see fire in these men's eyes. So I think you're right. I think it is a little of column A, a little of column B. And I think at times, sometimes it forgets it is a war story, a story of true events that have been now fictionalized thanks to this film. But at the end, they go into the revenge story sometimes a little bit more. And maybe, I think if it had dug into that a little heavier, if that was the character flaw that we had to deal with, and we just said this is a fictionalized account, I would have went with it. I mean, we have seen real stories told in a fictionalized way by, other directors. Quentin Tarantino has done a couple that I could think of where took a real world event and just fictionalized it. But he had no problem saying, this is fictionalized. This is my version. It is not real. This is my story.
Or, James Cameron made, one of his most successful films with that exact same premise. Like, there's a lot that happened on the RMS Titanic that he described that did not happen, flat out. But we accept that because, it's one of those things where we can just kind of engage this is an alternate reality.
And this is an attempt to be an epic. Absolutely is. It's got the length of it. Definitely does. And when you see these battles, and it's epic, and we'll talk a little bit about that spectacle in these battles, because a lot comes into that. But let's deal with the elephant in the room. Historical accuracy. Do we ping this story, and it is a story, because it is not accurate, because this is a war story that they based on real events and, make no claims. And believe me, there was a lot of controversy with the amalgamation and the characters that they made of the accuracy and how they were portrayed and how the British themselves were portrayed. So where do we draw a line as film fans? Do we just sit back and enjoy it? Or the fact that this was, especially for Americans, such a crucial point in the start of our history that we don't forgive it?
I think it's completely fair to ding this movie a few points. I think it's completely fair to, to say either try to be a tad more accurate or go completely in the this never happened territory, where it can be a lot more accepted. Mm-hmm. To kind of go back to that alternate reality sort of sort of setup there. In fact, and I'm sure this will come up at some points during our conversation here, but I'm going to liken this film to one of the most famous plays of the last 10 years, Hamilton, which has a very similar sticking point to it. It tells about real people and real events, but not in the way that it happened. And it takes a lot of liberties with how to portray these events. And granted, again, when you're telling a story, you can do that. Just understand that that doesn't automatically free you from criticism of people who want things to be told correctly, especially if you are trying to be, accurate to the timepiece. Like, I've seen that there are entire playlists on YouTube of, genuine historians breaking down every single issue that the Patriot presents. And it's a fascinating watch because, yeah, a lot of it is correct, when backed by multiple sources. But like in the execution of the story, emotionally, this works for me, even though logically, I also recognize this is not even close to how a lot of this would have happened. But I'm willing to let that slide because it is a fictional story.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I find myself at times enjoying this style, and here's the thing. And I think we should also make this a comparison to one other similar type of film, and that's Braveheart. Braveheart tells a very similar story, which is supposed to be based on a true story, which I won't deny. The Patriot is based on a true story to a certain extent, from a certain point of view. And stars the same guy, with that same level of epicness to it. And I clearly know that a lot of the stories presented in Braveheart just aren't true. They're just not true. They are fictionalized. There are things, let me tell you, I know it's stupid. The blue paint that they use would not have been available at that time, and yet that's one of the most iconic imagery of the film. The kilts that they used, not accurate to the time. Came later, the time. Anyway, I go on and on and on. Does that mean I hate the film? No, actually, I love Braveheart. Braveheart's a great film. So I have to go into this the same way. Here is my personal bias, which is a problem. I teach U.S. history to 8th graders, and I spend a lot of time on the Revolution. So when I watch this, you can't help but in the back of your head going, I didn't teach that. I didn't teach that either. Wow, am I learning something here? You learn, don't use this film as a teaching tool. But that being said, let's talk about some of our characters, because it really rides on that. And this is a large cast with a good mix of people you don't know who do a great job, and a couple of big names, and even a name that isn't big yet, but will be. Normally I would go bottom up, but let's start with Mel. Let's just start with Mel, because he is the focus of this film.
Yes, pre-cuckoo clock Mel Gibson.
Yep.
So it was okay to cast him and stuff. And yes, we joke about, the man that he revealed himself to be, years later, but like, yeah, he gives an incredible performance. I buy the character of Benjamin Martin because of him. And there's not much else to it. Like, he sells the pathos, he sells the ennui, he sells the anger.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yeah, there's not much else to it. There's, as far as I'm concerned with him.
The presentation of him in this film and his performance is good. I think it is a very good performance for him. In fact, I'll argue I think he's better in this than Braveheart, but I think there are a few more connections that work. And this whole dynamic of him being a father and that always being on his mind. And throughout this film, I absolutely love the use of the lead soldiers throughout this. He has a bag of lead soldiers that his son had, and we're going to get into what happened to his son in a minute. But he kept these lead soldiers, and when he chose to go to battle, he would melt these one by one into metal balls, musket balls, and he would use them as ammunition, and they were meant for specific targets. Very, to me, almost to Arya Stark, there is a sense of revenge in there. She has a list. He knows what he wants and who he wants. And when he sees that person again, oh, that's a problem. But balancing this fatherhood with this violent identity that he has, I can't think of a better moment of that than when he sought revenge for the death of his second oldest son. And he went out with his two boys and went on a murdering massacre to save his oldest son, played by who we're going to talk about next. But watching his kids and how they react in those moments, man, how do you balance that and not make it about your feelings at that moment? You've got your kids to worry about, and yet he goes on the rampage that he does.
I mean, yeah, it's kind of another trope of the warrior who is absolutely kind when not in battle, but as soon as they start seeing red, the gloves are off and you are dead.
Worf, great example of this for him as he evolved over time.
Yeah,
absolutely. Is this believable though? And I know his performance is good. Is that believable? That balance between that violent intensity inside of him and that sense of fatherhood?
Because I've seen so many characters done in this style, for me, yes, but I also would look at it critically and say it's debatable, because you would think eventually he would have to he would force himself to pick one side, or the story, if it was a little bit better handled or a little more focused and less war epic, the story would have made him make a choice, and that would have been a more interesting play. But I think in the context of what the Patriot is going for, I think it works.
Next one down on my list is a young actor. You might know him, Heath Ledger. Young Heath Ledger. He, to me, is probably overall the most believable in this film. He witnesses the death. Well, so he turns of age, and he goes off to join the war. His father. Now, let's be clear about this too. His father voted against supporting the war effort. They were called to town, and he's also a legislature for his state. And everyone else is like, we got to support. We've got to support. And he did not want this. He was like, we just let's have a reconciliation. Something that we hear not as much about, but was a big contentious effort during and leading up to the Revolutionary War, was this idea of, we are rebelling. Do we say sorry to the king and just try to get back in good graces and just be back to where we were, or do we fight and risk everything? He was on the sides because he's got 7 kids going, let's not fight. Let's just go back to what we were doing, and we just stand aside. But his son wants to join. He forbids it. Of course, his son goes and joins anyway. But the war is led back to him eventually, and his son is injured in the process of delivering communiques. The British come, and it creates all havoc for Mel Gibson's character. And I really buy him through this. And as he goes on, he's gung-ho and happy to be a part of the efforts, and he's really good. And he gets married. And you're like, yay! And this is not a happy film. Because in a scene later, you're about to say goodbye. But I find him to be the most realistic because of his headstrong nature, but there's an idealism and there's emotional stakes. And so I think his overall arc of this impetuous youth to becoming a man, getting married, having stakes, understanding what his father is going through, and then going back to child the moment that Tavington does what he does. What do you think of this arc for him?
Yeah, you kind of summed it up very well. Like, it's one of those characters where you're left wanting more, and it's only because of how the story has to play out, because of decisions not made by this, well, actually, sorry, because of decisions made by this character, that his story has to end a certain way. And it's like, well, it's the consequences of your actions, buddy. This is what happens in war.
There's another epic, that actually I think came out. I think it was the same year or a year later. The Gladiator, or Gladiator. It's a slightly different story, but you still got a war-torn man who has everything taken from him and has to do what he doesn't want to do. And I feel some similarities going on in these stories and character-wise. Let's talk about our villain.
I mean, to be fair, Mr.
That one's a lot better.
Well, actually, to be honest, no, I prefer this one.
Really?
Even though I do tend to say that Mr. Emmerich is something of a poor man's Ridley Scott. Tell me I'm wrong.
No, you're not wrong. But let's talk about the villains of this. Tom Wilkinson as Lord General Cornwallis. So good. Very subdued. I buy him the entire way. This is the way I expected a British general at the time to act.
Even though the real Cornwallis was not very accurate to the film, but you know what? Yes, no. From how the character is portrayed, it is a very compelling performance.
Yeah, a lot of fun. I kind of feel for him that he didn't get his dogs back. Man just wanted his dogs and his clothes. Man spent like a quarter of the film in one set of clothes. I felt bad for him. Oh, Mel Gibson was playing dirty, but that's what we did at the time. We played dirty. We had to. We had nothing else.
Yes, but good old Jupiter and Mars.
The true villain of our film, Jason Isaacs, good old Captain Lorca, and I enjoy it so much. This is a man you love to hate the entire way. He is an evil, twisted, loyalist, seductive man who wants nothing more than destruction and wanting to have more power to be more destructive. But I wonder, though, was that effective, or was this too mustache twirly exaggerated?
Well, this is where we have to kind of have that conversation of, where we draw the line. Now, fortunately for the history records, there is no William Tavington. So in here, I think it's totally fair game to make him a mustache twirling, amazing character that you love to hate. It's as far as villain performances by Jason Isaacs go, it's probably my third favorite behind Zhao and Captain Hook. But but the actual man that this was based on,
Tarleton.
Bannister Tarleton. He's a much more subdued kind of person who does still have a moment of infamy attached to him. His whole, the quick summation of his story. He comes over to the war front right at the start of the war alongside Cornwallis, and he's only like 21, 22. Very young man. Quickly works his way up, and by the time that we get to 1780, where most of the Patriot takes place, he's off more or less keeping Nathaniel Greene at bay. Mm-hmm. Greene thinks he's going to go on some big, glory campaign to take out the South from the Brits. Just gets his ass handed to him by both Cornwallis and Tarleton. And Tarleton continues on to kind of pursue the remainder of his forces and eventually gets to a city known as Waxhaw, which does lead to a very infamous massacre against the Revolution's Abraham Buford. And, he gets the blame for the Tarleton Quarter, as it were, but Tarleton technically was not in a position to give an order of no quarter, because during this battle, he gets knocked off his horse by a bullet. Or sorry, his horse gets killed by a bullet, lands on top of him, so he's essentially out of commission for the fight. Mm-hmm. And then his soldiers go on to literally give no quarter to Buford's men. And Tarleton, of course, has to take the blame for that. Right. But somehow, dude survives the war and winds up spending about good 20 plus years in Parliament. So, at least he has a happier ending than Tavington.
But historically, too, what Jason Isaacs' character does, what Tavington does, things like that overall did not happen, period. The British were very firm about the rules of war and engagement. Very firm. They fought the same way, regimented over and over and over and over again, which would be their folly in the end. Numbers, organization, and sheer regimentation. That's how they were victorious for so long. But the idea of burn the town down, shoot an innocent child, no quarter, kill them all. No, that was not the British way. They were tyrants, but not like that. And he just comes off as a hateful, spiteful, destructive man. And what I really like is Cornwallis going, you are not going to do that again. Ever. You're not. But then Cornwallis backs off when Mel Gibson makes it personal and tricks him. Which again, those kinds of things probably wouldn't have happened. Not like that. But the fact is that an officer of his regard, a colonel in their army, nonetheless, a dragoon, would never have done that at all. And that bothers me a little bit because it just makes him so evil. Now, I love that we have a clear distinction of how we want to hate him, but I would like a little more nuance. And I bring it to Captain Lorca. Captain Lorca Discovery is an evil man. No, we don't know that halfway through the season, but he's nuanced. There's a subtlety in what he's doing, which leads to us discovering the truth about him. But I really like that. Now, I know it's a different series, different writers, different things, but I want to see nuance in my villains a little bit. I don't always want a mustache twirly thing and this guy's like, burn the village down. What are you doing? It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, other than giving Mel Gibson and Heath Ledger something to rage about.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. Like, I actually am in complete agreement there too. Like the scene in town, oh, you are forgiven, but that's between you and God. That whole scene.
Oh, I knew that was coming from a mile away when he said what he did.
Oh yeah. No. Like, it is a little upsetting that they put that in the movie. However, the emotional side of me, the side that wants to be emotionally compelled by the story that's being told, that can't be more effective. That is one of the most effective ways of doing it. And it doesn't feel cheap, because this is within his character. Mm-hmm. And this is the character that they are trying to tell with. Now, yes, I agree that, I like my villains to be compelling when there is that nuance, your Killmongers, your Gul Dukats, but sometimes a mustache twirler is fine. This is one of those times where I am actually okay with the mustache twirling, because again, when you have a cast this large and you have to make things streamlined and focused, that's the price you have to pay. Again, if we had, I would say, like a third of the main cast gone, you'd have more time for that nuance that you're looking for. We just don't have that kind of time.
And no one's safe in this film. When you are willing to kill off Rene Auberjonois, who is a priest, he is a priest who joined the war effort. Let's keep that in mind. And you killed him off too. I'm like, nope.
A shepherd must tend to his flock, and at times fight off the wolves.
Could you see Odo doing something like that?
Absolutely. Oh, hell yeah. Well,
yes.
That's basically what he did in season 6. So.
When did he have time to film this movie? I'd like to know. He was still doing DS9, I think, at the time.
Well, I mean, they would have been wrapping up around this point, because
it's 2000, so filming in 99-ish.
Yeah,
so they would have still been right in the heat of it. I'm just wondering when he had.
They've been wrapping up, but yeah.
Oh, maybe that's part when he was away and then got captured. I don't know. Let's move into our direction, which we talked a little bit about. Roland Emmerich is known for large scale spectacle, as you put it, a poor man's Ridley Scott. However, this man has done some films that I love and that I still resort to today. Stargate. We have reviewed Stargate on this channel. I love Stargate. Independence Day, Godzilla, say what you will. It's a guilty pleasure of mine. I enjoy it. And a few others that I really do enjoy. Midway and The Day After Tomorrow, two different films. He's also done some pretty bad films. 10,000 BC, 2012. I did not like that movie. And the second Independence Day film, another film I really didn't like. Point is, this guy knows spectacle, he knows action, he knows what to do, and he's got a broad range of things that he has been a part of, which I appreciate. That being said, he really interestingly chooses that balance between a personal family drama, focusing on this man as a family man, and then the epic war sequences, which, by the way, has no qualms showing blood and gore. Now, I don't know which version you watched. I watched the extended version. Now, I didn't notice a difference, but maybe there was a little bit more there that I missed the first time I saw it way long ago. But he really balances this out, and when you think he's going to give your characters a rest, he doesn't. The Wedding, for example. Wedding is a great example. You think things are great, and then, Mel Gibson finally confesses he loves the sister, or the sister, I'm not my sister. You've been waiting for that the whole way, But then we balance that out with what is about to come next, which is the massacre of the town and the family and all of that comes down. So my question is, does this continue to feel like a Roland Emmerich film? Or is it not? And not to be the teacher here, but cite some scenes for me that really, really break it down that, yes, this is an Emmerich film.
I'm actually going to say no, this doesn't feel like an Emmerich film. Ooh. Because he displays a competence that's not very common throughout his filmography. Mm-hmm. I'm not very kind to the works of Mr. Emmerich. I understand that his big thing is spectacle. And for a lot of audiences, films like Godzilla, Independence Day, they can work. I'm not typically in that camp, to be perfectly frank. This is like his one movie where I genuinely buy the emotion of the characters. The way that he, the way that he establishes the friendship between Donald Logue and Occam. I forget what Donald Logue's character is called, but the way that they establish that sort of, very racist but ultimately respectful relationship where, at the beginning, of course, that the white guy's a shithead to the slave, but then once he's actually earned his freedom and they've spent time together, they've had this camaraderie. At the final battle at Cowpens, they're standing together in line, and he just looks at him. I'm honored to have you with us. Like the way that it's shot and the way the music is building behind it, it works. It works rather well, and also, with with how the couple of montage moments that we have in this film, which thankfully aren't a ton, but even with the montages, there actually is a nice deft hand that's not giving too much. Like when Gabriel is giving his monologue through the letter, and we see what happened at Valley Forge. We see where his friend is killed while he's under the command of General Washington. Or in the other montage where all of the ambushes are happening. Again, it feels coherent. You could very easily screw this up, but again, in a fashion that's not typical for Emmerich's work, everything feels consistent. And I again, this movie is kind of an enigma in his catalog to me. Because instead of just being emotionally satisfying, we have, coherence and competence behind the camera to back it up.
Yeah, I do think there's a nice balance where, I'm going to compare this to Independence Day, which really felt like the alien effects were, and at the time were revolutionary. No one had seen anything like that up to that point. But that was your focus on it. The ship, the flying battles and the planes, like they're pretty epic. Going up into space, like all of that felt like the Roland Emmerich films that I'm used to. This bigness that exists, and not a lot of time for your characters. They're there, but that's not his specialty. This felt much more competent to me. I felt for a man who's lost 2 kids to this war. By the end of it, he's lost 2 kids to this war, lost his wife, his daughter-in-law. Like, this guy's lost a lot. His entire farm is burned down. His livelihood, everything is gone. What a way to go.
You know that you have a steady hand at the helm of this project when one of the minor characters, Leon Rippey, who plays John Billingsley, is an early victim of Tabington's cruelty, where his own home is burned to the ground, and as well as his wife and child are murdered. And in the aftermath, John is so distraught over this that he ends it right there. And you buy every ounce of pain up to him pulling the trigger. And that's not just the great acting of Leon Rippey, who, again, is one of those cases of, oh, it's that guy. No, it's everything in that scene is just fantastic.
Yeah. And I think it also ties into the writing. The writing was not done by Emmerich. The writing was done by Robert Rodat. I don't know if they're silent. Anyway, not a lot on his credits. However, some films, again, 10,000 BC, I mentioned that. He also wrote another little war film that came out 2 years earlier. Maybe you've heard of it, Saving Private Ryan. Dude wrote that. Epic masterpiece of war filming. Like, great writing. But then he also co-wrote Thor: The Dark World. So, I don't know. But in terms of the writing, do we feel that the themes of freedom, revenge, and family, do they come out successfully? Do they come out, let's rephrase. Is it authentic? Or is this the subject of modernization instead? pandering more to a modern audience than being authentic to the period. And I don't mean accurate, I just mean authentic. It feels like a Revolutionary War film. It feels that way in the themes that are going with that. What do you think?
And this is where I do start to kind of agree with some of the criticism against the movie, because no, I don't think it does. Because, yeah, that's sort of, well, because that's the thing. If you want this movie to be successful, if you want this movie to connect with a modern audience, yeah, you'd have to. I mean, you have to do that a little bit no matter what. It's just a matter of to what degree. And I do feel that if you are trying to go for a realm of authenticity with this movie failed. Does that hurt the impact of what I feel when I'm watching The Patriot, though? No, it doesn't. I can live with that. I can live with that.
See what you did there.
Thank you. But no, like, I want to think that, you know, they kind of went with that similar approach to Saving Private Ryan, where you want to get the feelings across of authenticity, but you have to sort of, you know, modernize how certain things would have happened. And that's why we got, you know, the massacre scene. That's why we got a lot of the more brutal elements of this movie, because again, as we've established, that's not what would have happened. If we wanted to go authentic, they would have been a little more historically accurate. And again, that's not the story they're trying to tell.
Right. Yeah, no, I would agree with you. I would agree with you. Um, the last thing I want to go into the writing, and then we'll move into the spectacle, is kind of another kind of versus. Is this patriotic storytelling, or is it propaganda? In portraying our British enemies in such that one-dimensional villainous way, is that more propagandizing, or is this patriotic storytelling?
Well, I mean, depending on who you ask, because there is that military element to it, you know, the propaganda aspect is going to be there no matter what. That just comes inherent with telling this kind of a story. And given Emmerich's upbringing, because if I recall correctly, he was technically born in West Germany.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's very funny that he chose a more patriotic route with this.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah, no, I think there is that there is an element of propaganda to this. Because again, is any of it really critical of the war? Is any of it really critical of how the Constitutional Convention was trying to get independence going? Is any of it, you know, at all critical of the slave owning, which we'll probably have to we'll have to put a pin in that for the moment, I'm sure. But yeah, this is absolutely propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
But it's propaganda that works on my emotions. It's not trying to get my logic going. Because, well, yeah, and again, I'm sure you'll set up for it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it I feel if this film had come out post 9/11, I would 100% tell you this is patriotic. This is America. 100%. But it wasn't. And it was directed by a man who's not an American, he's a German. But then if I have to sit on either side and go, is this more propaganda or is this a patriotic storytelling? To me, the depiction of the British in the way that they do, but also the way they handled slavery in this, which I'm glad that you mentioned it.
Or
It
didn't.
does or didn't. You're right. There is a mention twice. Slaves are given the opportunity to abandon their plot, come fight for the British, and then after a year of service would be freed, or so they were told. Now, the American armies offered the same thing. Come fight for us, and after a year, you'll be freed. Except we had one guy who was freed, who wanted to fight in the South, by the way. Probably not likely. Not likely. But it feels like propaganda. See, look, we're Americans. Look what us Americans can do. Look what it, and I hate to say it too, considering what we know later about Mel, even though he didn't write, he didn't direct, I can't help but feel there might be a little bit of America in there, but that's not patriotism. That comes off to me more as propaganda than it is love of your country.
So yeah, so here let's stick on this rabbit hole for 2 seconds here, because I think we're addressing the same thing.
Yeah.
So there's the scene before his home is burned down where the whole Tavington is, doing his spiel about all slaves who serve under the crown will be freed, yada yada. And then the one guy, oh, but we're not slaves. We are paid to work the land. That's was a very different conversation when they were initially making the movie, because they were supposed to be slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I'm not going to speculate on who made the change, but the change was made. That is known.
You're in the Carolinas at that time. Come on.
And then, not to mention that, again, this is documented, where if let's say the average slave was to go for either the American or the British armies, they were going to have a better opportunity going with the British. This is confirmed.
The British had already banned slavery by that point in UK. Now, not in the territories, and that's another historical thing, but in Britain and with the British Army, slavery was already banned.
Yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely. Man, is it rough? And it's not bad. It's just, it makes me feel uneasy. Not enough that I hate this film or don't want to watch it, because I was glued to it. But it's enough that makes me go,
this is very much a movie that you kind of, that if you want to engage with it emotionally, it's kind of the only way you really can.
Yeah. It oversimplifies history. It really does. And it still leaves me with this feeling of America, which to me is not the best thing to do. It's not. And that's what it leaves me with. And I don't like it. I don't like that it makes me feel that way, because we are, as a country, we are much more nuanced than that, both for good and for bad. We are not just straightforward the good guys like this depicts. And the British were not straightforward the bad guys. And the soldiers were not straightforward the bad guys. There was a lot going on at that time. And I guess for the sake of a film, you got to create conflict. You got to do those things. I understand. It just still made me feel a little uneasy. But
well, it's kind of like, the franchise that I love most, Star Wars. Like, thankfully, we're starting to get to an era where they're trying to get better at nuance, and they're getting there. But, they kept those first 3 films as dumb and simple as possible to get the message across. And, well, unfortunately, way too much of the fandom still couldn't get that part of it.
Well, let's talk about the part that I think overall Emmerich does best, and that's spectacle. That is the wow factor. I actually really enjoy all the wide shots of the fields Every time we see them marching into battle, I love it. As someone who loves history, I loved seeing those ranks and those regiments and the way they were fighting and the way we were fighting and responding. I loved that. I loved seeing how the ghost, he's not the swamp fox, he's the ghost. But I love how they're choosing to fight, and that felt real to me. And every time those things are happening, it's just great to see those images, the uses of flags, cannon fire, all of it felt so awesome to look at and to watch. But what puts the cherry on that visual splendor is the music that I completely forgot was made by the great one himself, the only GOAT in music, in my opinion, John Williams.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, that score is so good. It's not one you're going to remember, but it covers all the moments. I say this a million times. You're not going to buy the soundtrack to this. You're not. But you're going to know how it made you feel. You might not remember how it sounds, but you know how it made you feel and when it made you feel. That's the sign of a great score. And Williams knows how to do that.
So here's a very funny thing. I just for fun, I want to take like 30 seconds. I want to run down the films that John Williams did 2 years before this came out and 2 years after, if you don't mind, if I may do that quick.
All right.
Okay. 98, Saving Private Ryan's Stepmom. Both great scores unto themselves. 99.
Stepmom?
Yeah.
Holy cow. See,
Yeah.
again, things you learn.
99, Angela's Ashes and Phantom Menace. Phantom freaking Menace. 2001, AI, Artificial Intelligence. And then Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. 2002, one of his busiest years with Attack of the Clones, Chamber of Secrets, Minority Report, and Catch Me If You Can. And yet, and this is going to sound weird coming from me, I would put the Patriot about on par with Phantom Menace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I enjoyed this, and the music was so great. And you forget it's John Williams, but again, I'm okay with that because it was just carrying me like a river. It's just moving me down the way. You forget you're on the river. You're just enjoying the journey. And I really enjoy this. And it allowed me to take in the battles more and know those emotional moments. That is the power of music. And that is also the power of the scene as is presented to us, as Emmerich gives it to us. You know, getting to see everything and to watch those battles. And yes, they were bloody. Yes, they were brutal. I absolutely loved watching those battles. It was like watching a reenactment or a documentary, or like you're actually there. Amazing work. And I also don't know this for a fact. I'm sure we could research it, whether some of those setups were CG'd in or were actual extras and stuff like that. But I bet there was a healthy number of people in red and blue coats walking, marching.
From behind the scenes material that I definitely watched when I was younger on the DVD. Yeah, it was a bit of both. Like obviously, you get they were a little more CG friendly with the actual cannon damage, but yeah, there was absolutely still plenty of physical people in these fields walking and marching, putting their guns ready and firing off, and you're seeing all the smoke and the effects. Like a lot of it is done practically. It's just, you have the CG touch-ups when it's required, and I think that helps sell the illusion of the film.
Yeah. Either way, in the end, this comes down to me still, and I'm still going to say it. It's the best Revolutionary War film I've ever seen.
Over 1776, huh?
The war hadn't started yet. It doesn't count.
The war had started by that point, but
17th, we did not declare our independence. Well, okay. I guess it depends on your definition of war and how that really flies out.
I count Bunker Hill as the official first battle. So as
Fair
far as I'm
enough.
concerned,
Fair enough, but even that one is not accurate either. We want to play into that. And it's a musical. Now, I'm not knocking a musical, but if we're talking a historical epic or a historic story, I really want to see the battles. I want to see those things. And 76 has its place for what it does. And I use it in teaching and I love it. But to me, if I want to see what the real effects of the Revolutionary War are on people, whether they're fictionalized or not, this is the film I would show. I might show just some of the battle sequences, just for them to see what it's like, or the tail end when they describe them going to Chesapeake Bay, and the stopping with Lafayette. By the way, I would have liked to have seen Lafayette. Just
but we got Villeneuve. Isn't he good enough for you?
I wanted Lafayette the whole time. Lafayette.
I'm making these red coats red with blood stains.
Lafayette.
All right.
Anyway, oh my gosh! But still, to me, this is the best Revolutionary War film, fictionalized or not. It's enjoyable. Does it have problems? Yes. Is it perfect? No. Is it accurate? No. But I think this is the idea that the spirit of what it is supposed to show is. And that matters. That's really important.
Yeah, I would completely agree where it's don't go into this movie expecting actual substance outside of maybe a couple of character beats that you're not necessarily expecting.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a movie where, yeah, I have seen this well over 10 times now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's never gotten boring for me. I'm engaged every time that I see it. Because here, let me just give a little bit of transparency here for our host here. I did not rewatch the movie before we sat down for this.
Ooh, I did all through the week. I did because I hadn't watched it in a long time.
I haven't watched it in a long time either. But I have this whole thing memorized.
Wow.
Like it's one of those foundational films that kind of got me into wanting to learn about the actual history. And that's where I think this movie has its truest strength.
Mm-hmm.
If you're someone who kind of wants to get involved in history, but you're not sure where to start, a movie like this is a fantastic resource to kind of give you the general idea. And then you go from there.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I enjoyed this film. I would absolutely rewatch it. And it has its flaws, but I don't knock this one for those flaws because, again, at the end of the day, as a film, it gets its spirit, it gets its heart out where it needs to be. And for that works for me. Plus, we don't have anything else that really compares in terms of a movie. There are a few miniseries that I do enjoy. The John Adams miniseries is really good, but not good for showing battles. That's the part that I go, I haven't seen anything else that really fit this. The same way that the definitive version of the invasion of Normandy is probably always going to be Saving Private Ryan. It's effective. It's epic. That is accurate, by the way. That one, I know they worked their tail off on that one. But the point is, I do want a healthy combination of spectacle and heart. And I think this does that for us.
I would agree.
All right. Well, I think that sounds like a pretty good recommendation from both of us. All right. Next week, we are headed to Strange New Worlds. We're going to be taking a look at season 1, episode 2, Children of the Comet. And we just got a trailer announcing that this July, season 4 is coming out. Woo! Sorry, I'm already having a bit of a Star Trek hangover. I watched Starfleet Academy. I loved it. And then I was sad. So I need more Star Trek. And next month's movie, we are going from something very serious and very deadly at times to something not so serious, but very deadly. We are going to take a look at the dark comedy Throw Mama from the Train. Because I needed a Kate Mulgrew film, and that's the one I think about every single time. So we're going to be taking a look at it with Jeff, with our special guest Jeff, who will be joining us for that. And we got a lot of great movies. In fact, the first movie of this summer, I'm not going to say it's May, our June movie, we changed it. By special request, we're going to take a look at Transformers 1. So that's coming up too in a couple of months. Dohmen, got anything to plug?
Yeah, so if you guys like heavy metal, you can follow my band Last Shot Redemption at LSAR Band MN across Blue Sky, Instagram, and TikTok. We released our debut album Perspective back in October. You can find it on our Bandcamp as well as all music streaming platforms. Go check it out.
Awesome. And of course, Brennan, who is not here, but you can find his channel, Page Turners They Were Not, where you probably found this on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, all of the places where all of them. In fact, the last thing he posted was a review of episodes 5 and 6 of Maul Shadow Lord. Check that out. Maul is a great series. A lot of fun. Way to go, Sam Witwer. And you can find me on Twitch and Twitter at CIngle1984. But as always, we end every episode, kaploch, and live long and prosper.
Take care.